For those curious about the UFO phenomenon, it is sometimes traced to historic roots and clues found in folklore, in the memories of villages, and in accounts preserved across generations. One such story comes from Sahalahti in Finland. A letter from a resident there was passed on to a member of the Interplanetist Society, describing events said to have taken place 300 years ago. The letter was later published in Vimana No. 3-4 from 1967. As a child, I heard stories about old man Tiittu, who lived in this village. He had been a blacksmith, a sorcerer, and a healer of pains. He even cured cancers, though at that time only skin and breast cancers were known. He could also stop bleeding. He was regarded as a kind of life doctor, and he defended the cattle of the village from predators. One midsummer Sunday, the parish priest, speaking from the pulpit, accused old man Tiittu of witchcraft and threatened to have him burned at the stake, as was done with witches in those days. At the same time, he declared that from then on, the old man would no longer be allowed to enter the Lord's temple or to take part in Holy Communion. The old man replied to the priest, "You will yet regret your words," and walked out of the church. That same day, as soon as he returned home, the priest fell ill with a severe sickness, and the following day, wild beasts killed the parsonage's cattle. Then the priest sent his servant to summon Tiittu to the parsonage. The old man obeyed the call, and the priest asked forgiveness for the threats he had spoken in church. The priest recovered, but from that time on, Tiittu never again went to church or to Holy Communion. In those days, the cattle of this village were driven to distant forest pastures, and a herder was hired to go with the herd. One day, when the cows had eaten their fill, they lay down to rest on a small clearing in the forest. As they lay there, the herder opened his lunch bundle and began to eat. Suddenly, he was so frightened that his food fell from his hands, for he saw a bear of gigantic size walking out of the forest onto the clearing. The bear walked past the herd into the forest, where it disappeared. The herder was startled again when he noticed that the cattle did not get up, did not run away, and did not even stop chewing their cud. When the herder boasted in the evening at home about what he had seen in the forest, the old man explained that it had not been a bear that appeared to him, but the forest elder, who had taken the form of a bear. "Now you can be sure that not even this summer will predators touch your herd," the old man added. Old man Tiittu traveled through many surrounding parishes healing the sick, and he never demanded payment from anyone. But he received so many gifts that with them, he bought this very house where I am now spending my final days. He did not himself become the master of the house, but gave it to his son, while he continued to live in his cottage near the farm. When he was already very old, one summer morning a black Capercaillie appeared on the roof of the old man's cottage. After a moment, the bird flew off toward the backwoods. The next day, the same thing happened. When on the third morning the Capercaillie came to the same spot, the old man said to his daughter-in-law, "I have been ordered to go to the backwoods, and I must obey the command." When the old man left for the forest that morning, then around noon, a strange object appeared above the village. It was like a giant-sized disc that had come unnoticed and stopped above the village. After a while, it began slowly moving toward the backwoods, where it disappeared. It was haymaking season, but people abandoned their work and ran home in fear. There they prayed, sang hymns, and confessed their sins to one another, for they were certain that Judgment Day and the end of the world were near. The next day, the people continued praying and did not dare leave their houses. Not even the cows were milked. They bellowed in the cattle yards, hungry and thirsty. Only on the third day did the villagers dare to resume their ordinary work and tasks. When the old man did not return home, the villagers went to search for him. But in the forest, a great bear appeared before his son and began to speak as humans speak. "Do not fear me. I tell you that you search for your father in vain. You too saw that rainbow shining heavenly chariot. It carried your father up into the heights, to another better world where a race higher than man dwells. Your father is well there, and does not long to return here." The bear vanished, and the search was abandoned. The commotion about this heavenly chariot spread through the parish, but since in the meantime a new priest had arrived who condemned such talk in church as sinful superstition and the delusions of drunkards or simpletons, the story was gradually forgotten. In this village, however, it was remembered until my own childhood. My mother told stories about old man Tiittu, but she did not believe in the heavenly chariot. Whether the appearance of the heavenly chariot was true or not, people believed it had come, and it must be admitted that this old man was ahead of and above his time, truly an exceptional person. The old man had gathered his knowledge and skills as inherited lore from his distant forefathers. He tried to teach everything to his son and pass on his skills, but the son grew up a drunkard and a petty thief, unable to receive or master the secret knowledge. And so those skills and teachings perished with the old man. Not even my mother knew when old man Tiittu had lived, but when the history of Sahalahti appeared in print, the matter was clarified. In the record of householders, beginning from the year 1539, it is shown that in 1701, the master of this house was Irio, son of Titus. Thus this Titus had lived the prime of his life in the 17th century, nearly 300 years ago. Indeed, many stories have been preserved from times much earlier still. When I was a child, long autumn and winter evenings were still filled with the telling of such tales, but long since the mouths of the storytellers have fallen silent. They now rest in the parish graveyard, and no new ones have arisen, and even the tradition of folk tales has either moved away from here or died. We humans are not and never will be equal, for there is always someone who has received far greater spiritual gifts than others. That Titus, or old man Tiittu, must in his time have been a kind of torch of light or a shooting star in the darkness, for otherwise no stories would ever have arisen about him. Now that was the end of the letter. What should we make of this strange story? It would be easy to dismiss the old folkloric accounts as nothing more than superstition, the same kind of dangerous thinking that church and state authorities had condemned for centuries. But superstition was never simply ignorance. It was a system of meaning, a way of reading the world when natural forces and human lives seemed inseparably bound together. Storms, illnesses, sudden deaths, or lights in the sky were interpreted through signs and correspondences, and these interpretations were handed down in stories, remembered in villages, and sometimes feared by the powerful. As science and enlightenment in the 17th century presented the mechanistic worldview, superstition did not vanish overnight. In Les Météores, René Descartes would lay out his vision of a sky governed not by signs and portents, but by matter in motion. Published in 1637 as part of his Discourse on Method, the book set out to explain everything that appeared in the air: clouds, hail, thunder, lightning, rainbows, comets. His aim was to strip the heavens of their supernatural character and show that they obeyed the same physical laws as the earth below. But his relationship with superstition is not as clear-cut as one might think. Auguste Comte would later complain how modern philosophy seemed to have its origin in one of Descartes' cerebral episodes, an episode ripe with lightning, thunder, and dream-induced superstition. In November of 1619, René Descartes, 23 years of age, found himself housed for the winter in the small town of Neuburg, on the Danube near Ulm, deep in Bavaria between Stuttgart and Munich. Neuburg and Ulm were centers for mathematical study, and nearby lived Johann Faulhaber, the most renowned mathematician in the region. Faulhaber had just published a book on arithmetic and algebra. When he encountered the young Frenchman, he set him a problem, partly in jest. Descartes, irritated, not only solved it but went on to solve every problem Faulhaber could think to put before him. He even helped the master work through challenges that had been posed by a rival mathematician in Nuremberg, Peter Roten. The experience was intoxicating. It confirmed to Descartes that he possessed a rare gift, not only in mathematics, but in the kind of reasoning that could master any problem put before him. It gave him a new confidence in his own powers. At 23, Descartes was concerned about how best to spend his life. His brief experiences as a soldier had not offered much promise, and although he was already showing unusual skill in mathematics and in what was then called philosophy, it was not yet clear that this should be his vocation. That winter, he rented a house in Neuburg, retreating into solitude. There, under these circumstances, he had an experience that he would later say changed the course of his life. On the 10th of November 1619, he recorded that in a series of dreams, he had found what he believed to be the basis of the admirable science, as well as his own calling in life. He took these dreams to be supernatural in character. That night in Neuburg, Descartes experienced the first of his extraordinary dreams. He found himself walking along a street near the church of the College of La Flèche, the Jesuit school where he had studied as a boy. He was on his way to say his prayers when suddenly he was caught by a tempestuous wind. It whirled him about so violently that he could barely stay on his feet. At one point, he turned back to show courtesy to a man he had neglected to greet, but the gust threw him against the church wall. From somewhere in the courtyard, he heard a voice calling out that a friend had a melon to give him. At that moment, he awoke, his body in pain. He turned onto his right side and prayed for protection against any evil effects of the dream. Sleep returned, and with it a second dream that filled him with terror. He heard a loud crash like a bolt of lightning, and in an instant, his room was filled with sparks. A third dream followed. On his table lay a dictionary and a book of poetry, open to a line from the Roman poet Ausonius. Quod vitae sectabor iter. What path shall I follow in life? Then a man he did not know appeared and handed him a verse. Descartes caught only the words est et non, yes and no. So what did these dreams signify? No need for any other interpreter than Descartes himself, who supplied the most important take, and he arrived at this conclusion still half asleep. He decided that the dreams were not random, but part of a connected series. The dictionary, he thought, stood for the sciences gathered together. The book of poetry signified philosophy, joined with wisdom. The words est et non, yes and no, were, to him, the yes and no of Pythagoras, the principle of truth and falsity that governs human attainments in science. The line from Ausonius, "What path shall I follow in life?" was, in his view, the good counsel of a wise person, even moral theology itself. The tempestuous wind that had thrown him against the church he interpreted as a malo spiritu, an evil genius trying to compel what should be voluntary. The thunder and lightning that filled his room he understood as the spirit of truth descending and taking hold of him. Only the symbol of the melon remained. Even in sleep, Descartes gave it meaning. He saw it as his love of solitude, something he now reproached himself for having sought too much. In his understanding, the first two dreams concerned his past life, while the third looked ahead to the future. The spirit of truth, he believed, wished to open for him the treasure of the sciences. And he added, in his own words, that the genius that heightened in him the enthusiasm that had been burning within him for the past several days had forecast these dreams to him before he had retired to his bed. In Descartes' case, even as he became the emblem of rational philosophy, he treated his own dreams as revelations, filled with signs that spoke of vocation, truth, and the sciences. We would like to propose that the story of Tiittu from Sahalahti could belong to the same horizon. The connections between natural events and human destiny are not always easily separated. What the Enlightenment would later label superstition was also, for those who lived it, an acute sensitivity to patterns at the edge of perception, and a way of binding together the seen and the unseen. Between Descartes in Neuburg and Tiittu in Sahalahti, lies a shared landscape of interpretation, where dreams, storms, and strange apparitions were never merely accidents of nature. They were signs to be read, sometimes as danger, sometimes as truth, always as part of the living fabric of the world. To accuse someone of superstition is to dismiss their way of making sense of the world, and often to bring them under suspicion or punishment. The mechanistic worldview of the 17th century pictured the universe as a vast machine, its parts moved by strict laws of motion. It promised to sweep away superstition and reduce nature to calculation. What remains of it today is the habit of seeking regularities and laws. But the picture of matter as dead, mind as separate, and the cosmos as clockwork has long since broken down. Modern science sees restless fields, quantum probabilities, and self-organizing systems. Life and mind are no longer outside nature, but bound up with it. Rather than making us less curious, this should make us even more so. For what people once called superstition often carried an attentiveness to the unexpected, the dreams, the storms, the lights in the sky. All of them moments when the boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary felt especially thin. What do you think? Is it worth to keep looking? Like always here on Stories Lost, we'll leave it up to you to make up your own mind. That is it from us this week. Thank you all for your generous support. We truly appreciate your enthusiasm, your critical perspectives, and your feedback. A big thank you to our supporters. See you next week.